Being the last panel session, and I can see that most of you would be wanting the session to end as quickly as possible so that you could go home. That is the flip side. The positive side is we have all the time in the world. The topic which has been given for this particular session is resilient forest management to combat climate change. In the last 2 days, you have been hearing a lot about the impact of climate change on various facets of our lives and how it is impacting the earth. Now, this particular topic which has been given to this particular panel pertains to the resilient forest management. Something which is very difficult to assess because the biodiversity losses which happen are spread over large landscapes which are difficult to assess. And since they're difficult to assess, they're not very visible, but it silently keeps happening. But there are certain scientific facts which are proved and are well known. The global temperatures are going up. This has brought its own set of problems. The high sea temperature the water temperature which is going up has severe impact on the coral ecosystem. The high temperatures are causing the polarized caps to melt. The consequent result is the increasing sea level rise, which has again adverse impact on the coastal ecosystem, particularly the vulnerable shores which are not very high above the sea level. So those islands are adversely to be impacted, and a lot of our coastal townships and areas of residence and biodiverse rich areas would be adversely be impacted. This also is bringing about changes in the ocean currents, the impact of which we have still not realized now. And that impact will have a kind of result which could be very disastrous. Changes in the sea currents would change the way the erosion and accretion happens on the coastal areas. And all this combined is resulting in adverse weather conditions, particularly the increase in the extreme weather events, which has its impact not only on the coastal ecosystems but also on the terrestrial landmass. There is another important aspect of climate change which is impacting biodiversity through the forest ecosystems, which is the hydrology. The increased temperatures, the warming of the earth, combined with the acute drawal of both subsurface and deep aquifers, is resulting in total disruption of the hydrological balance, and the impact of which we are still not very sure. The type of hydrology would impact the type of vegetation that we have. So its impact, the reduced water availability, subterranean, under the forest ecosystem, what type of impact it will have on our existing forests, our existing biodiversity, is something which we need to fathom and understand. The topics is very broad, and it would take a long time to comprehend all facets. However, we have an interesting panel of speakers who would be covering areas from biodiversity conservation to mangroves to including human-animal conflict issues. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce the speakers to you. The first would be Mr. Vasudevan, who created the mangrove cell in the year 2012. And this cell has done an extremely useful role in preserving the mangrove ecosystems. And also this cell has also now been mandated to take care of the coastal ecosystem. And we are keenly looking forward to hearing him speak, because as a part of this summit's takings, we would be rather keen to see if we could replicate that cell here in our state. The second speaker would be Dr. Pugulendi, He has done extensive work in forest and wildlife areas, and his topic is safeguarding biodiversity for a resilient future. The third speaker is Rakesh Kumar Dogra, PCCF and Chief Wildlife Warden. His topic is on innovative solutions to combat human-wildlife conflict. Then we have Dr. Rajshekharan from IFGTB. His topic is on climate-resilient forestry, strategies for adaptation and mitigation. And the last speaker would be Dr. Uma Ramachandran. She would be talking on mainstreaming biodiversity into climate policy. So it's quite a wide range of topics, and I would request the speakers to be rather brief and not exceed the at least 5 to 7 minute time limit, so that we could conclude this session in time and give sufficient time to the audience to ask questions if they have any. Thank you. May I invite Mr. Vasudevan to commence his first talk.
Thank you, Mr. Reddy, and distinguished panelists and members of the audience, participants of this wonderful climate summit. I'm glad to be here, always happy to be in Chennai, where a lot of expertise is there in mangrove conservation. I myself picked up my ABCD of mangrove from Chennai when I attended an M.S. Swaminathan Foundation training way back in 1992, on a long 10-week long program. So I have a lot of memories. And Chennai is a place where a lot of mangrove experts are there, well-known national experts. So it's a privilege to be invited here. So I'll start with the presentation. It's a longish presentation, but I'll try to be brief. Basically, with a brief introduction about mangroves, I'll try to speak about the kind of work we did in Maharashtra, which may be of some interest to you, as already the chairman has expressed the desire to have that kind of activity in here. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Do we have a remote for changing the slide? Yeah. So this is the importance of mangroves. Most of you may be aware. Basically they are, in times of tsunami, cyclones, etc., they act as bioshields. Their contribution to fish production is well known because they act as nurseries for juveniles, also give protection from large predators, and they contribute to land building and coastline stabilization, pollution control. They are home to many threatened wildlife. Also, the roots and the stilt roots and prop roots, they are home to many oysters, mussels, and all. A lot of contribution to fishery, tourism, recreation. I think around 2,000 well-known tourism areas all over the globe are actually mangrove areas. They provide a lot of materials to the local communities, fuel woods, small timber, fishing, etc., fishing implements, etc. And they are the storehouse of salinity tolerance genes. And I think there is some research going on in transferring these genes to some of the cultivated varieties of rice and other things. And what is talked about now more is the role of mangroves in climate change mitigation and sea level rise. In that context, mangroves along with seagrasses, salt marshes, combined name is blue carbon ecosystems or vegetated coastal habitats. So these coastal habitats are real intense sink for storage of carbon, and that is their main role, which is talked about more now in the context of sea level rise. But mangroves themselves may be impacted by climate change in either positive or negative ways, depending on the situation. So it is also, climate change is also a threat and an opportunity for mangroves also. So this is the global distribution for mangroves are found in 124 countries, between the latitude of, let's say, 25 degrees north to 25 degrees south, but it also extends a little bit south also, up to 30. Then 5 countries where you have maximum mangroves are, you can see those names. India is only 3.2% of the world mangroves, but we are part of the Sundarban, which is the largest continuous stretch of mangroves in the world. This is the state-wise distribution. As you can see, Sundarban occupies a very major part. Tamil Nadu has got only 41 square kilometer, but I think the potential is much bigger than that. These are some of the species. These are some of the globally threatened species of Indian mangroves. So now I'll come to Maharashtra. We have a coastline of 700 kilometers and the current extent of mangroves is 324 square kilometer. So when we started the mangrove cell, it was actually 186 square kilometer. So it's a jump of around 72%. And we have about 20 species of mangroves in Maharashtra. It all started with a very significant order of the Bombay High Court, which declared that on a PIL, it declared that there will be a total freeze on the destruction and cutting of mangroves in the state. This was in 2005. And regardless of the ownership of the land, all construction taking place within 50 meters on all sides of all mangroves to be forthwith stopped, no development permission to be given. And very significantly, all mangroves on government land in Maharashtra to be declared as protected forests and handed over to Forest Department. So till this point, Forest Department practically had no role in managing mangroves. So it is at this point that the Forest Department came into having any role in management of mangroves. And then this was followed by a final order, which is also very significant because it talked about fundamental rights, duty of the state, the public trust doctrine, and so many things, which is also significant from a legal, historical point of view. And this is the increase in mangrove cover in Maharashtra. This graph clearly depicts there's a flat area that you can see, 186. From 2005 to 30 it was flat. And then you see that orange vertical where mangrove cell came into existence, and then you can see the sudden jump of about 72%. So this is that story. Mangrove cell was created in 2012. And this was followed by a mangrove foundation. The mangrove cell is more of a regulatory body, part of the Forest Department. Mangrove Foundation is a registered society, more into development role, promoting research. So it has accumulated a corpus of fund of about 616 crores now through various programs which impacted the coastal environment. So somehow this corpus has built up. This has made Mangrove Foundation one of the strongest independent bodies managing environment in our country. And this gives it a kind of operational flexibility and also a kind of self-reliance without waiting for the budgetary flow from the government funds. So this kind of mapping was done for the entire coast, clearly giving 3 kinds of areas. The red is the degraded mangrove, the blue is the dense mangroves are in green, and the blue is a creek, and the other areas are non-mangrove areas. So, and in for Mumbai, where we have all kinds of problems related to influx of people from all parts of the country, we created a special task force, and this task force was very effective. And ultimately, they had to remove about 6,000 illegal hutments from various parts of Mumbai. I don't have to explain the kind of challenges involved in that, but it was achieved. And a lot of plantation efforts, nurseries, about 10 million saplings were planted. But along with that, we involved the local communities in the rural areas through a number of livelihood programs like crab farming, mussel farming, oyster farming, cage culture of fishes in the creek areas. So all this, even ornamental fish culture was promoted among the local communities. We created a central breeding facility for supplying the small ornamental fishes, which would be reared by the... So there were mangrove co-management committees at the field level, which took care of all these activities. And at Mumbai, we created this Thane Creek Flamingo Sanctuary, and along with that, the Flamingo Watch program, and a coastal marine biodiversity center was established. And finally, Maharashtra is the only state which has declared a state mangrove tree, which is Soneratia alba. So there are some pointers in this which probably other states can pick up. But let me remind you that in the National Wildlife Action Plan 2016 to 30, there was a suggestion that each of the coastal states should create a coastal ecosystem cell. And the deadline given was 2018. But I think other states are yet to follow suit. But basic summary of the work done in Maharashtra is that legal protection was strengthened because all mangroves on mangrove government land were declared as reserve forests, and then strict enforcement of law, creation of institutions like mangrove cell, mangrove foundation, and mangrove co-management committees at the grassroots level, then co-reforestation activities through plantation, community participation, and partnership with a number of institutions. And finally, the financial independence and operational freedom which was available to the Mangrove Foundation. So this is in short the story of mangrove cell and how we try to protect the mangroves in Maharashtra with discernible results. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Vase. Now, may I request Dr. Pugulendi to do his talk.
Respected Chair, senior and junior colleagues, good evening to all of you. That picture is definitely mine, but I didn't give it this time. Probably it dates back some 10-15 years ago. Anyway, not my mistake. You can ask the organizers. But it looks good. Anyway, good evening once again. My topic is, how to safeguard biodiversity in the eyes of or in the wake of climate change and what it brings. Yeah. So biodiversity, as we know, is, definition-wise, it's a heterogeneous assemblage of, living organisms on the earth. So first, let's take a look at what have we lost and how did we lose it. As we know, or as we have learned, life has existed on earth for more than 3.5 billion years. And more than 95% of the species that ever existed had already gone extinct. At present, the estimates say that around 10 to 15 million species, inhabit Mother Earth. Around 15,000 species are being discovered and described every year. So, species comes and species goes. Why we need to be alarmed? That's a question. There are two things mainly. One is the rate at which extinction is happening, rate at which the species are disappearing, and the reason why it is happening so. The kind of mass extinction that we learnt through movies and through literature is that which dates back to around 65 million years ago. At the end of Cretaceous period, the mighty dinosaurs vanished. That was the mass extinction we ever learnt of. Now scientists say we are in the middle of a mass extinction, and that's entirely driven by human activities, which is leading to climate change and stuff like that. So this is the cause. This is the cause for worry, the reason and the rate at which this is happening. So then we need to know why. The species that we know in the past 200 years have disappeared. This is the speed at which things are happening, and it's more climate driven than anything else. So why should we conserve biodiversity? As we know, it's a source of resources, food, fodder, fuel, fiber, medicines, you name it, all those tangibles are from the biodiversity that we need to preserve. And then comes the intangibles, the way they protect the environment, the way they cleanse the ecosystem, the way they balance the hydrological cycle, the way they balance carbon in the world. So all those intangibles are the ecosystem services we know. To put it simply, clean water, clean air to, to impress upon common people. And then comes even more intangible things like social and spiritual. One poet and a naturalist, he had said, Henry David Thoreau, he had said, this curious world which we inhabit is more wonderful than it is convenient, more beautiful than it is useful, and it is more to be admired and enjoyed than it is to be used. Now it says beautifully about the third most intangible kind of a thing. So why do we need to conserve? Simply for the selfish reasons of human survival, and more so, it is the only natural defense that we have against climate change. Now is the time to talk about climate change and what it brings to the table. How it manifests, of course, rising temperature, everybody has spoken about it. Every year we read at some point of time, this is the hottest year of the decade, or a couple of decades like that. And then, unfortunately, the subsequent year turns out to be hotter than the previous one. This is the way it is going on. And then the altered precipitation patterns. See, I have spent more than a quarter of a century. It feels nice to say it this way. So almost a little more than a quarter of a century in Kerala, the God's own country. There, when I was working as a DFO, I've seen pre-monsoon showers or summer showers, and then a beautiful gap, and then the enchanting monsoons of Kerala. Now, all that has, that coalescing effect. There is no gap between anything. And what I see now, after 25, 26 years, is either it's dry or it's a downpour. That's what I'm experiencing in Kerala. This is what is happening. And that leads to extreme weather events as well. And of course, pests and diseases, I don't only mean about the pests and diseases, I mean the invasion of weeds and alien species as well. When I was raising plantations as a DFO, I had to still fight against weeds to establish a successful plantation, but that used to be fight against 4 or 5 varieties of weeds. Now they're innumerable, and it's a war against weeds to raise a successful plantation. This is how climate change is, bringing improbable things to the table. And, how it impacts biodiversity. Habitat loss is one most important reason that we should look at, how to tackle this. And it's leading to loss of local species, and finally it is leading to climate-driven extinctions, which are quite common these days, as we spoke earlier. And change in seasonal events. By seasonal events, I mean even pollination, flowering, fruiting, migration of animals. Everything is impacted by climate change, which leads to several extinctions. Yeah. I've just borrowed a couple of pictures to raise some temperature in this air-conditioned room. You can understand habitat loss, how much can happen with slight increases in the global temperature. And the coral reefs, how soon and how fast they can disappear if something happens in the tune of plus 1.5 or plus 2. It doesn't sound big, but the effect is almost catastrophical. Now I'll briefly tell you about a few stories from Kerala. Grim stories, sad stories, of course. Because of all these, climatic changes and the deleterious impacts, 2018 was a grave year in the history of Kerala. That was the biggest beating we got for being careless about what we have been endowed with, what we have been, blessed with. That was the, floods and landslides in 2018, and it was massive. And 2019 we got a reminder from nature, and then 2020 also it continued in some other places, and the latest one is 2024. This is what happened, ladies and gentlemen. unbelievable loss of life, property, and everything. You name it, all kinds of sad things happen. Uh, Wayanad, Idukki, and Malappuram districts were the worst hit. Can you just imagine? One huge, settlement just came down, washed down. Now, what happened? I'm just taking 2018 floods and landslides alone as an example. It was the worst ever floods in the state of Kerala since 1924. 42% excess. This is what I was mentioning earlier. It was a downpour, not drizzle or drips. It's a downpour. 342 landslides in such a small state in 10 districts, and 209 inside forests also, and 433 human casualties. You can see almost 75% of the villages were affected, 5.4 million affected, and 1.4 million displaced. In a small state like Kerala, you see the recovery cost was estimated at around 30,000 crore. Now, Kerala really went deep into all these sufferings, and we could actually work out something to, for the future's sake. Rebuild Kerala mission was born. We named it as a Nama Kerala mission. That means you are building a new Kerala. The focus mainly was to for an integrated water resource management. We gave some interesting taglines also. Give room for the rivers and living with water. These are some taglines which will attract anybody. And then the second point, eco-sensitive and risk-informed land use. There, elaborately regarding climate change resilience, a lot of things were discussed and spoken, and several policies, they emerged out of that. And then inclusive, people-centric approach, and etc. And this awakening led us to, thinking deeply, and then, projectizing and implementing how to go for a climate change resilient forest management. This is what the theory says. We need to invest more on species, more on forest structure, more on, protecting the forest from one of the most degrading drivers of forest degradation, that's the fire. Edaphic factors, soil health, we hardly pay attention, but that needs to be paid. And genetic selection, and more importantly, forest management cannot be static any longer. It needs to, go with the flow. It needs to understand what is happening around, and then, the management has to evolve. These are the basic tenets, as we know, of climate change resilience. So what did we do? So I'll skip this. In Kerala, as you see, 78 point and odd percentages are natural forests, and almost 14% are plantations. So we understood that this is where we can actually do something. What to do? We went for this, eco-restoration. As most of you are aware, even UN declared, this whole decade as a decade of eco-restoration. So this is what we turned to. The basic, background is this. Historically, even starting from British time, we have been managing forests as a, kind of a source of raw material, industrial raw materials. It's driven by the policies at that point of time, that's fine. But then, we were decimating natural forests, and we were cultivating as monocultures these industrial, plantation, raw material plantations, eucalyptus, acacia, you name it. And, what it led to, habitat fragmentation, deterioration. So, as a result, this is what we have now. 27,000 hectares of exotic monocultures and 90,000 hectares of teak plantations. That's not all bad, but Kerala is known for its teak, but the monocultures didn't take into consideration the wildlife requirements, the other biodiversity requirements. A monoculture remains a monoculture, whether it's teak or, whatever else. So, we brought out something like this, an eco-restoration policy 2021. Every person in Tamil Nadu loves to hear a little bit of Malayalam, so that's how I kept it last. Swabhavika Vanangaluda Punasthabana Naya Rekha. So, sounds good, isn't it? So, this is what we brought in 2021. It's actually an action plan to mitigate climate change, and the focus is to ensure ecological and hydrological security of the state. And these were the basic ideas, basic philosophies which were part of the action plan. You know, gradually replacing the exotic monocultures into natural forests by introducing more of native species, protecting the soil and water regime of the area, addressing human-wildlife conflicts. That's a whole subject. The next esteemed speaker is going to talk about it. Invasive alien species removal, protecting the forest from fire, and etc. etc. These are, and we have several natural ecosystems like special habitats like sacred groves, mangroves, myristica swamps and stuff like that. So they are conserving them in particular, then improving not only the green cover inside forest but outside forest as well. That's trees outside forest, TOF, through social forestry efforts. So this is how we came up with this, and it's a continuing process. Out of this 27,000 hectare, we have already treated near around 3,000 hectare because it's driven by fund requirement as well. Now we are planning to extend it to another 5,000 hectares in the coming years. So these are a couple of pictures to show you what's happening. And then this is another strategy. With this, I'll be stopping. Voluntary relocation of human habitations inside the forest, because when we are trying to rebuild Kerala after the natural calamities, this is what the post-disaster need assessment came up with. It highlighted the increased vulnerability of forest enclosures, so they need to be immediately attended to, and something needs to be done in the face of and to protect them from the impacts of climate change. And we took it seriously, and we came up with a program to relocate voluntarily whoever is coming forward, to relocate them from inside forest to nearby areas with better civic amenities. Because the main reason, one of the reason was conflict, human-wildlife conflict. Anyway, that's a whole other topic for another day. So we developed a package, and the finer points are there with me if anybody wants to know. And we formalized the processes, approval processes, and this is what finally happened. We have relocated almost 782 families. It's an ongoing process, but as of now, this is what has happened. Almost, just to add some glamour, around 216 equivalents of football field has been restored and consolidated, and this is what has happened. You can see the agriculture holdings, those habitations have turned into beautiful green pastures, and wildlife, they are visiting these areas, and it's painting a pretty picture now. This is another example. Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pugilendi, for the valuable insight of Kerala example of resilient forest management. Now, may I invite Rakesh Kumar Dogra, PCF and Chief Lab Warden, Tamil Nadu, to give us an insight of the innovative strategies being adopted in our state for mitigating human-animal conflict.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are aware that forests of Tamil Nadu are extremely well endowed. If you look at forest cover of Tamil Nadu, it is around 24.5%, which is actually less than the national average. But these forests of Tamil Nadu are home to extremely high level of biodiversity and wildlife. You talk about any protected area type in the country, and we find it is available in Tamil Nadu. We have a very stable population of elephants in Tamil Nadu, but more so, look at the growth which has taken place in our tiger population in the state of Tamil Nadu. Now, this growing healthy tiger population of Tamil Nadu is an indicator that, the forests of Tamil Nadu are resilient, the forests of Tamil Nadu are well endowed, forests of Tamil Nadu act as a habitat which supports a large amount of prey base, which is able to have a growing population of tigers in the state of Tamil Nadu. So it's a very positive sign for conservation in the state of Tamil Nadu. But at the same time, this is throwing open a lot of challenges actually. And human-wildlife conflict has evolved as one of the most challenging aspects of wildlife management and threat to conservation. This human-wildlife conflict, manifests in a number of forms actually. It is some sort of a, crop damage which takes place in interactions of wildlife outside the forest areas. It also, manifests itself in the extreme form of, human loss of life actually, which is taking place, and the scores of other things. And in the bargain, there is death of wildlife also, which takes place. So, it's a loss-loss situation for both the ends actually, for the conservation, for human beings, as well as for the wildlife. I'll give you just a snapshot of, how many cases actually which are being dealt in a year in a state of Tamil Nadu, and we see that, there are almost like more than 4,000 events of crop damage actually which are happening, more than 250 events of livestock death, more than say 150 or 170 events of, property damage which are taking place, 80 human deaths, which is extremely high number actually. And, more than say 130, 140 events of, human injury, which department is tackling every year, especially, and this too is, concentrated in certain months of the year, especially during, coming summer season, when the chances of human-wildlife interaction and negative interactions are increasing day by day. Why is there a conflict actually? Was conflict every time this severe? Many drivers actually which are there, which have been identified, which are driving conflict in, in the forest areas and outside nowadays, are habitat degradation through extreme biotic pressure. We all understand that, this is a human-elephant or your human-wildlife conflict is a human-induced phenomena. It's actually as a result of a lot of anthropogenic pressures on the forest. The proliferation of invasive species is another aspect which is actually leading to loss of important habitat for wildlife. We know that forests of Tamil Nadu, we have almost like more than 2 lakh hectares of lantana invasion in forests of Tamil Nadu. And species like Prosopis juliflora, we have invasive alien species which are actually now coming up. The problem was not there some 20 years back, but we are identifying new invasives which are, affecting the forest habitats. For example, Senna spectabilis in forests of Tamil Nadu. We have more than 3,000 hectares of, invasion of Senna spectabilis which we have to contend with. And these are leading to, loss of definitely quality habitat in the state. The fragmented habitats and loss of connected corridors over a period of time with the developmental activities have also been responsible, especially in case of mega herbivores which need to migrate over a larger period of time, for example, elephants. Cropping pattern in very next areas to the forest, which attracts a lot of wildlife, and a lot of attractive crops are being made. Now this not only creates artificial attractions for the wildlife, but at the same time it also leads to changing the food habit and feeding patterns of the animals over a period of time, which results in conflict. We have enlargement of human habitations adjoining the forests. Earlier times there used to be a lot of buffer areas which are available between the villages and the forests. And those buffer areas used to, act as a cushion actually for interactions of humans and wildlife. Nowadays, those cushions are not available. You step right out of the forest area, you see sprawling cultivation of crops happening, which acts as an attraction to the wildlife. So now, government of Tamil Nadu is taking a number of steps actually, and I will enlist very few steps only for the shortage of time. One thing is providing a very positive regulatory framework for the various steps to be taken for the people to be able to tackle human-wildlife interactions. One, One such thing is which is done also for the first time in the country is a framework for the registration of power fences in state of Tamil Nadu. This not only provides actually for checking the quality standards of power fences for the farmers to be able to provide use standardized equipments, but also prevents electrocution deaths actually by a mechanism of continuous monitoring of these power fences by electricity and forest officials. Similarly, Tamil Nadu has come up with a framework of dealing with, policy framework to deal with the invasive alien species and also to restore these habitats. And a massive amount of effort is already underway in, restoration of habitats by removal of these invasive alien species. Government of Tamil Nadu has already doubled the ex gratia amount which is actually paid in case of unfortunate death which takes place in case of man-animal conflict. This is another initiative which is actually not there in other parts of the country. Every elephant death actually is audited and audited in a very transparent framework with NGOs, with the local body members' participation, and with the veterinarians. So as a result of which, every death of elephant also sometimes it may be or may not be because of the human-elephant conflict, but it is subjected to that sort of a audit so that we learn lessons and they are there in a transparent manner, they are implemented. We have you would have read in the newspapers, we have in Coimbatore experimented with the use of artificial intelligence along with the railways in order to avoid accidents on the linear infrastructure and also avoid human casualty in the linear infrastructure pattern. And this is doing quite well actually. As much as that Government of India has also taken up this as an important priority areas of human-wildlife conflict mitigation. We are also using drones actually, especially thermal drones. And these drones are not only to monitor the movement of wildlife, but these drones are also used sometimes with the imitation of various carnivore sounds or various bee sounds actually in order to push the wild animals or wild elephants back into the forest. These are also used in case where carnivores comes out and it hides and it becomes otherwise very difficult to locate it actually in a conflicting situation. So these type of units are quite useful. And one such unit is functional in case of Hosur. A large number of barriers have been experimented in state of Tamil Nadu traditionally. Let me tell you, no amount of barrier is actually able to offer a permanent solution because most of the wild animals and also elephants are very intelligent individuals. Over a period of time, they adapt to different sort of barriers and they find out ways as to how they can escape out of those barriers. This one is the latest actually steel wire rope fencing, and it is proving quite effective in combination, in singly or in combination with other methods to create some sort of physical barriers for the wildlife not to stray into the human habitations. Now, any wildlife mitigation measures have to be with the public cooperation and participation. So there also, usage of technology is extremely important. Earlier days, we used to have evening meetings and all with the people. Nowadays, almost, the penetration of mobile telephony in state is almost like 100%. Everybody has almost like a smartphone nowadays. So as a result of which, a lot of platforms have been provided actually, which provide an opportunity for, or a platform for locals to come together and for the department to be able to share the advanced intimation regarding the movement of wildlife in particular areas. We are also, in Tamil Nadu, we have started identifying certain problem animals in some areas, and we have also got into active wildlife management in the sense that, capture and translocation from spillover areas into the areas which are deficit in, in the wildlife populations is also very important aspect actually in case of wildlife conflict management. And all these animals which are actually, translocated in different locations are monitored through GPS collars so that their movement is studied and, their behavioral pattern is studied, which gives indications as to how we design our strategies and we refine our strategies over a period of time. The compensation, as I already told, we have already doubled the compensation, the ex gratia for loss of human life. I'll just share you a small video clip which will sum up most of these activities which are happening, and this is a case taken from Hosur Forest Division. So I must say, the efforts of mitigating human-wildlife conflict are continuous efforts. There is no finality of any solutions. A lot of research and innovation is continuously required, and to provide solutions so that human beings and animals are able to live peacefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Rakesh, for giving that insight into the various steps being taken by the Tamil Nadu Forest Department to mitigate the human-animal conflict. The field staff, not only in this state but all over the country, spend a fair share of time grappling with the problems associated with the human-animal conflict. Now, may I request Dr. Rajshekharan to tell something about the climate resilient forestry activities. Thank you.
Respected Chair, panel members, and the participants. Good evening to all of you. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I'll be talking about climate resilient forestry, strategies for adaptation and mitigation. Before going to the strategies, I think a quick recap on the impacts due to climate change. The impact can vary across regions from coastal to hilly region, and the forest types like solar grassland and mangroves may get affected, and they are more vulnerable than other forest types. And climate change also can have increased as well as decreased plant growth, and it can also facilitate the spread of invasive species, and it can also negatively affect the native species and the RET species, and it can also change the phenology, and it can have increased frequency and intensity of forest fire and diseases. It can also lead to severity in extreme weather conditions. It can also affect the forest in delivering critical wood and non-wood forest products and the ecosystem services. And it can also affect the livelihood of various forest-dependent communities. Next, coming to the strategies, the climate resilient forestry should be a long-term adaptive strategy which can accommodate uncertainties as well as the changing climatic conditions. It should be based on sound ecological principles. If you can see that the first thing is to maintain biodiversity at all scales, meaning biodiversity at the beat level range level, and the landscape level, and the regional level. And then maintaining the genetic diversity, because different genes may have different resilience. So we need to have different, as far as possible, we need to maintain good genetic diversity. And the next thing is maintaining a structural complexity in the forest. Because in the forest, you know that we have the top story, the understory, and the ground layer. So as far as possible, we need to have structural complexity, as well as we need to have the connectivity across landscape. So landscapes, due to fragmentation, and we need to reduce the fragmentation, as well as we can recover lost habitats like forest types which are lost, and as far as possible, we need to have expand the protected areas. At the same time, we need to have functional diversity, because different species in an ecosystem will have different functions. So as far as possible, we need to maintain functional diversity. Last, we need to reduce non-native competition, meaning invasive species and the other exotic species should not be introduced, and as far as possible, we should try to manage them. So all these climate resilient forestry should be based on ecological principles. So you can see that the major strategies in the forest sector are, before going to the strategies, we need to have a sound understanding on the ecological principles of climate resilience. We need to have mixed species forestry, improved agroforestry and tree outside forest, landscape connectivity, and we need to follow nature-based solutions for adaptations. Substitution of wood and wood fiber. Actually, we rely more on fossil fuels. So we should think, can we use wood energy instead of fossil energy? At the same time, a lot of these invasive species nowadays are being used for making briquettes. So these briquettes can be used for wood energy. And similarly, we can think of using wood fiber, maybe from invasive species, which can supplement or which can reduce the use of cement, steel, and aluminum, because all these require more of energy. So we should think of this substitution of wood and wood fiber. At the same time, we need to go for planting climate-ready species, meaning species which can accommodate drought, which can tolerate drought, which can be resistant to insect, which can give higher biomass, which can give good pulpwood, because the Tamil Nadu require a lot of pulpwood. So we should go for climate-ready species. And then we need to have a capacity building among the staff, and more collaborative effort is required between the researcher and the forest managers and the community. And then we need to have institutional mechanism for all the strategies. And the institutional mechanism should have a timeline, and it should have strong financial mechanisms. And we also try to have a balance between the demand and supply of various forest products. So these are the major strategies. So in the next slide, I'll be talking about some of the issues which need some interventions. You know that phenological response, meaning the timing of flowering and fruiting, is the first impact which can be seen in all plants due to climate change. These phenological impacts can vary between species and between ecosystem. Any mismatch in phenology will have a cascading effect on the pollinator, like butterflies and the herbivores and other species. So we need to have a long-term phenology monitoring. It could be based on field studies and also using satellite remote sensing. We need to quantify the phenological changes, and we need to evaluate what are the ecological consequences because of phenological mismatch. What happened to the plant-pollinator interaction? What happened to the herbivore and plant dynamics? And how the overall ecosystem functioning is affected because of this changing phenology. Moreover, we need to have strong models. Nowadays, we are having a lot of AI models and machine learning models. So we need to use these phenological data in climate projections. That should be thought of it. My earlier speaker, Vasudevan sir, has already pointed out the importance of mangroves. And we know that the mangroves in east coast of India and Andaman, they are vulnerable to climate change. Hats off to Tamil Nadu State Forest Department. So they have carried out a lot of plantings, and the mangrove area in the state has doubled. So, and moreover, the Tamil Nadu State Forest Department under Green Tamil Nadu Mission is planting mangrove seedlings across 13 coastal districts. So the strategy should be based on either bottom-up approach. We need to involve the local communities in the restoration and planting of mangroves. And a lot of microbes are involved in various biogeochemical cycle in the mangroves. So they should be focused, and we need to have a long-term monitoring of mangroves. So the Institute IFGTP has recently established a 1 hectare mangrove monitoring plant, long-term monitoring plant in Pichavaram. So we'll be recording various futures data from this long-term plot over a long term. Coming to the agroforestry, you know that everybody knows that agroforestry is the potential strategies for climate change mitigations. Even the National Action Plan on Climate Change as well as the State Action Plan on Climate Change emphasizes on agroforestry. And again, hats up to Tamil Nadu government. So it has taken under Tamil Nadu mission on sustainable green cover in farmlands. It has improving and strengthening the agroforestry. Various agroforestry system in India, it can sequester about 0.03 to 0.06 petagrams of carbon per year. So if at least 30% of increase in agroforestry, it can reduce the climate change and greenhouse gases. But there are a lot of issues which needs to be addressed, like lack of quality planting stock, labor availability, precision agriculture techniques are available, not available. We need to have efficient price support system for the farmers, and we need to ease out loan and insurance and marketing. So some of these paper industries, they are going for buyback arrangement, but for other species it is not available. So we need to ensure buyback arrangements, and then a lot of farmers face a problem in transit pass. So we need to ease this transit pass, and then we need to have a strong extension and services so that people will get awareness. And some other strategies includes we need to have allocation of funds. We need to have a roadmap with a clear timeline and monitoring and evaluation criteria. Most of these agroforestry, they neglect these silvopastoral and agro-silvopastoral systems. So they should be emphasized, and various research and development on climate-ready species should be thought of it. Already our institute of Forest Genetics and Tree Breeding has introduced several high-yielding clones. So those clones have higher biomass, and it can give higher pulpwood. And similarly, we are yet to assess the ecosystem services of agroforestry. We also should thought of use of this biofuel and bioenergy from agroforestry. We need to have a certification framework for nurseries and planting materials so that we can give quality planting stock to the farmers. At the same time, we need to have a synergy between various departments. As far as possible, we need to align this agroforestry with existing policies. Coming to the invasive species, many people know that climate change can facilitate the invasion. So I request all the participants to give a big round of applause to the Tamil Nadu State Forest Department, because Tamil Nadu State is the only state in the country to have a policy for invasive species. So my earlier speaker, Dogra sir, also was mentioned, but you people have missed. So I thought it's my duty to tell you about this. And the policy has already prioritized these invasive species. At the same time, we need to prioritize ecosystem as well as specific habitats. We need to have a sound restoration strategies. So for that, research needs to be taken up, and a lot of synergies required between the scientists, the protected area managers, and the stakeholders. We need to assess the relationship between the invading population as well as the environmental factors. We also need to study the genetic diversity of these invasive species, how this climate change can facilitate or it can hinder the spread of invasive species. We need to have improved AI and machine learning models to predict the future spread of these invasive species. We need to have a strong institutional mechanisms for managing these invasive species. At the same time, we need to have a capacity building among the staff. Coming to the long-term ecological monitoring. So long-term ecological monitoring started in the mid-90s in our country, but most of these long-term plots are in Western Ghats and in Eastern Himalayas. So emphasis should be given to establishing long-term ecological plots in solar grasslands, mangroves, wetlands, and dry deciduous forests in Eastern Ghats. And mostly these macrofungi, amphibians, and bats, they are neglected, so we should give emphasis. Similarly, we also study the traits, interactions, and how much is the carbon sequestered, litter decomposition, and soil moisture and soil nutrient status should be monitored in these long-term plots. And similarly, we can also have long-term plots for monitoring the spread of invasive species. And we need to have a strong long-term monitoring for RET species. And we need to facilitate, as I said in other studies, we need to ease out and we need to have synergy between various stakeholders. And then we need to have various, using these automatic weather stations and tools and GAs, we need to collect regular data from these ecological monitoring plots. Coming to the urban forestry, we know that urban heat island effect, to reduce this urban heat island effect, we need to go for increasing tree cover, but it should be volunteer based. It could be maybe we can use CSR funds. We also need to assess the ecosystem services, and we should go for modern utilities like rain gardens, green rooftops, blue roofs, stormwater drains. So we need to increase the permeable surface in urban areas as well as in wetlands. So the major focal strategies are, we need to have a roadmap for all these strategies with timelines, with criteria and indicators. And we, as far as possible, we need to maintain the biodiversity, functional diversity, standard landscape structural complexity, and we should maintain connectivity across forest landscapes. And as far as possible, we need to reduce the invasive species, and we need to have intervention for priority species and ecosystem. We need to have develop and deploy climate-ready species. We should go for nature-based solution for adaptations. And then we need to have a long-term monitoring plots for various species, ecosystem, and we need to study carbon sequestration, and we need capacity building and collaboration. So these are the strategies which the government and other agencies will take. But what we can do? So we need to have follow this lifestyle for environment. We need to adapt pro-environment lifestyle. Maybe we can follow our traditional lifestyle, and we should reduce the carbon footprint. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajshekhan, for giving us some insight into the strategies which need to be adopted for various adaptive and mitigation measures to combat the changes in the climate. Now may I invite Dr. Uma Ramchandran for the topic mainstreaming biodiversity into climate policy.
Good evening to all, respected chair, dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, and my dear friends. First of all, I would like to place my thanks for the opportunity given to the National Biodiversity Authority to present today. So the topic is mainstreaming biodiversity into climate policy in the context of resilient forest management. Next slide, please. As we all know, India is part of several multilateral environment agreements. So, and the most crucial ones in today's context, thank you, sir. Thank you. The most crucial one in today's context is the United Nations Framework for Convention on Climate Change and the Convention on Biological Diversity. So as we go up, we find that 2022, we had this COP, CBD COP, that came up with this coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So this has about 4 goals and 23 targets, And these are very crucial and which has to be adopted by all the parties that have signed these agreements. So basically, this particular decision, 15.4, COP15, the fourth decision, talks about this to implement the global biodiversity framework, which will enable the participation at all levels of the government and also involve all the indigenous people and the local communities, as well as the women, youth, into all these implementation, including also the civil society organizations, the private sector, and stakeholders from across the sectors. So the mission of this particular framework is to halt the biodiversity loss, and the vision is by 2050, the biodiversity has to be valued, conserved, restored, wisely used, maintaining the ecosystem services, so that we have a healthy planet with healthy ecosystems. It's just to set the scene that we know that biodiversity is continuously declining, and it is also very much vital for the well-being of the ecosystems and also the human health. And the decline is also due to multiple interacting drivers. Though climate change is one of the main drivers, we have so many other factors that play a crucial role in the decline of the biodiversity. So there is also need for more and better scientific information, such as the IPCC, the International Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. There are lots of regional assessments that happen. These are very much scientifically done, and therefore it's important to follow those. These are some facts and figures. 2022, the total primary forest loss has been something like 10% increase in the forest loss. And 2022, from the Global Forest Watch, we have this data on the percentage of primary tropical forest loss due to all the several factors. So coming to the main key drivers, we have some of them mentioned, like land use change. For instance, the trend one would be increasing intensity of management on forest lands. So there is a lot of extraction of the natural resources, then area of forest plantations, and intensification of forest management. The other thing is continuous logging of the intact forest landscapes. But of course, few countries like Russia, the global scenario, we find that 52% of it has lost the forest landscapes. And forest fragmentation, earlier speakers have already mentioned about this. So this is very much crucial and is causing, 2 days before we had this Supreme Court order on the linear projects. So these need to be really looked into at greater depth before any such projects happen. And it is really causing also the forest fragmentation. And the impact of that is also on the genetic pool, the genetic diversity of the forests. And the effect on biodiversity and nature's contribution to people, this is talked of very much these days, nature's contribution to people, because as we need to contribute to nature by safeguarding them so that the nature can contribute to us. So loss of structural, the effect of all this biodiversity decline would be the structural components. This was also spoken by quite a few of the speakers. So this structure has to be intact so that the functions remain intact, and the fragmentation can be reduced to a large extent. So India, we have this State of Forest Report 2023, where the forest cover has shown an increase, but there is also a degradation and decline in the density inside the recorded forests. So the most highest degradation is seen in Mizoram. I'm also touching slightly about agriculture because this is very much linked. And the intensification of conventional agriculture is due to these large-scale monocultures, which was also talked about, and high level of mechanization, LMOs. In the context of the CBD COP, this was discussed in great detail, the living modified organisms, and India has been constantly opposing to this. Effects of conventional agricultural intensification, also is like transformation and modification of natural and semi-natural habitats. This is happening at all patterns like physically, biologically, chemically. And reduction in species richness is also happening. So your diversity is lost and therefore the richness is lost. And then, of course, the LMOs and erosion of the natural capital. So, for example, pollinators, because these play a very key role, a vital role in the ecosystem and in maintaining the ecosystem health. Other drivers, there are examples like, for instance, overfishing or over-extraction of the mineral resources, pollution. And invasive alien species has also been mentioned by quite a few speakers in this session. So these have actually this has increased for all the taxonomic groups. And there was another news item very recently on NGT's objection to the invasive species. The catfish has been, despite 2 years of it banning, still we find these catfish even in the fish markets. So there's this definition of mainstreaming biodiversity, which actually struck me as authored by Harrison et al. This talks of mainstreaming biodiversity, and it defines this as involving the integration of biodiversity concerns into everyday forest management practice, as well as in the long-term forest management plans at various scales. So this is actually a search for optimal outcomes across social, economic, and environmental dimensions, which are the 3 pillars of the sustainable development. Now, typically, a convention, a CBD COP, this is how the structure follows. There is a plenary coming out from the earlier intersessional meetings. So there are something like a subsidiary body on scientific, technical, and technological advice. Then we have a subsidiary body on implementation and so on. And then during the COP, you have these working groups happening, and then contact groups, which are very closed groups that discuss on very specific and highly sensitive areas, and then the Friends of Chair to kind of come to a consensus on some very minor issues that, so that the parties come to a consensus. So these are the things that happen during the, this is how a decision making happens during the COP, CBD COP. And of course, in the national context, I'm coming to the National Biodiversity Authority, which is mainly has a regulatory function, a facilitating function, and an advisory function with its 3-tier institutional structure. We have the biodiversity management committees right at the bottom, and then the state biodiversity boards, and the National Biodiversity Authority, each with a specific role. Now, I would like to bring to attention to 2 different agenda items that was discussed during this COP16 that happened in Cali, Colombia. One was on mainstreaming of biodiversity within and across sectors. So this starts from the Article 6 of the CBD, which is the general measures for conservation and sustainable use. So here, one thing that was made very clear was to integrate as far as possible the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity into relevant sector or cross-sectoral plans, programs, and policies. So this was talked about in detail, and the mainstreaming biodiversity initially during the 13th COP focused on agriculture, forestry, fisheries, structure, and so on. Fisheries and aquaculture and so on. And in the 14th COP, the focus was on energy and mining, infrastructure. So mainstreaming biodiversity into these sectors. And in the 15th COP, when it actually came up with this Kunming-Montreal Biological Diversity Framework, it spoke about the focus on specific targets under the KMGBF. And also, there was a lot of discussion on the international organizations and relevant stakeholders to come up with a draft long-term strategic approach for mainstreaming biodiversity, and also come up with an action plan for implementing the KMGBF. And then there were 2 subsidiary bodies of implementation, 3 and 4. SBI 5 happened during this COP, but SBI 3 and 4 spoke about these long-term strategic approaches to mainstreaming and made some recommendations. Now, India's position with respect to this agenda was it acknowledged and appreciated the CBD Secretariat's approach for mainstreaming, supporting capacity building events, and working closely with all the stakeholders. We have this, and we are now adopting this whole of government, whole of society approach. And we are also incorporating the SDG targets into the updated National Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan. We have released the NBSAP during this current COP, and we have estimated something like an 82,000 crores, close to 82,000 crores as the estimate to actually implement the KMGBF targets. And what we are also emphasizing is there should be a regional coordination across sectors, which will be a key factor to effectively implement this. Now, the other agenda item that was discussed in the COP was the diverse values of biodiversity. And here it talks about the IPBES methodological assessment, where on the diverse values and valuation of nature. And it also calls for a shift from the global focus from a short-term and economic growth, which often excludes consideration of multiple values. So we need to focus on long-term, because our earlier speaker also talking about long-term strategies. And several of the diverse values have also been incorporated in the KMGBF framework, and it includes mainstreaming of multiple values of biodiversity and the relevant decision-making of the IPLCs, because the indigenous people and the local communities are those that are living very close to nature, and their knowledge, their experience and practices would go a long way in integrating them into the mainstreaming process. And the parties also encouraged to incorporate these updating of these NBSAPs that has also been reflecting in our national reporting, including also our national reports to the UNFCCC. And India has also incorporated this in the NBSAP under 14, and we have gone quite a long way. And India's position in terms of this particular agenda is we have welcomed all the assessments that have been carried out by IPBES. And we being a mega diverse country, we are looking into ecosystem-based approaches, which was also touched upon by the speakers earlier. And also, getting into the practice of respecting the Indian traditions in terms of their knowledge, respecting their knowledge, and because this has a very long connect with the biological and cultural diversity in our country. And we are now talking of living as part of nature, living with nature, living in nature, and living from nature. So this is the India stand, and balancing conservation and sustainable ecosystem services. This is also to ensure the human and the ecosystem well-being when we talk of the diverse values. And we also have been adopting a combination of government-driven and participatory approaches. And as NBA, the regulatory authority, we are one of the pioneering countries to come up with the Biological Diversity Act, and this was amended recently in 2023. And we are trying to put in place revised regulations, especially in terms of the access and benefit sharing process, because the IPLCs are involved. And India recognizes the intrinsic and diverse values of biodiversity and has also aligned all these into this National Biodiversity Strategy Action Plans. And why I had to look into the COP and the international agreements is because we are talking about policies. And that actually stems from all the international agreements and our positions and stands based on our national circumstances, our national priorities and circumstances. So the policy options that could go a long way is to mainstream and conserve the sustainable use of biodiversity by sustained provision of nature's contribution to people. So we can follow a lot of awareness programs. We have seen very good examples of the Tamil Nadu state and Kerala state defining policy objectives that is concerning all the sustainability dimensions, designing policy instruments and policy mix to support the implementation. Implementation by far has a lot of challenges, but that has to be overcome. by a kind of a coordinated effort, and developing integrated approaches across sectors. Coordination between sectors and sustainable management practices within each sector is important. And measuring also the national welfare beyond the economic indicators. This would go a long way also. And also looking into introduction of ecological fiscal reforms, which will help integrate these approaches among the sectors. And participation also of a wide range of actors and stakeholders in the governance process. This also has been talked about in the examples in the 2 states that was just presented. And we need to involve them in education, training, and also increase funding both from the public and the private sector, because currently when it is mandatory for all the private sector companies to come up to put biodiversity as their as part of their balance sheets in their annual reports. This is very much critical, and in fact the Schedule 7 Companies Act talks about private sector involvement for, the companies have to invest in ecosystem preservation, biodiversity conservation, but essentially we have seen that this sector invests in health, in education, but very limited into these kind of environment related sectors. There are examples and good examples in India, but they are limited. So the conclusion, coming to the conclusion part, the biodiversity loss is due to a complex systems of multiple drivers. So we have the major trend, increasing intensity of land use and climate change that lead to biodiversity loss. Then single driver, single sector approach will not work, because we need to have multiple sectors, multiple drivers to be considered, and multiple stakeholders also to be involved. And future impacts on biodiversity are underestimated, because most of the decisions or the scenarios, they consider only few drivers. So therefore, it's important to include all. And additional things for a strategic plan for biodiversity is to our target on hand by February 2026, we need to, India has to, submit its National Report 7 or NR7, where it will talk about the implementation of the KMGBF starting from now on. And then we also need to have, to achieve this 2050 biodiversity vision of the KMGBF, which addresses climate change and all the other development goals, and analysis of the primary sectors that indicates the drivers that is linked. For instance, agriculture, if it accounts for 70% of the projected loss of terrestrial biodiversity. So trends in food systems is very, very important. It is crucial because it'll help shape the food security in the wake of all these multiple drivers, including climate change affecting this sector. So biodiversity and health also is there's a very important connect, and that was also actually, incidentally, one of the important agenda items during the COP16. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramchandra. This panel has actually overshot the time, so if there are any queries, I'm sure the panelists will be more than happy to take a couple of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If I may please request our session chair to present our speakers with mementos, our tokens of appreciation. Before that, if I may invite everybody in the audience to put your hands together as we extend our heartfelt thanks. May we have the mementos brought out. Thank you so much. Starting off with Mr. Vasudevan. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here. Dr. Pugarendi, IFS Avargal, thank you. Mr. Rakesh Kumar Dogra. Dr. A. Rajashekharan. And Dr. Umar Ramachandran. We'd also like to take the opportunity to request Mr. N. Vasudevan to present our session chair with a memento, extending our thanks. The final session here, ladies and gentlemen, what an amazing one to close with. Thank you so much to all of our speakers and panelists. Of course, before we do in fact wrap, I do have to let you know that we found a bike key that was misplaced. So if anybody is missing the key, please do find it at the sound console. This is a bike key, so feel free to reach out to the team at the console. They'll be able to help you with that. Also with that, if I may take the chance to extend our heartfelt thanks to our speakers, our panelists and session chair. Ladies and gentlemen, our final round of activities for on-stage proceedings. We started off on a note of empowering young minds, keeping that excitement on climate change, up when it comes to the youngsters in particular. And with our next act on stage, or with our next activity on stage, we're going to take that one step further. We have someone who's absolutely young, raring to go and waiting to make a difference. Please give it up a solid round of applause for a 16-year-old social entrepreneur and public speaker. We have Ms. Hasini Lakshmi Narayanan joining us on stage. Welcome, Hasini. Thank you, sir. Hasini also, by the way, is the Young Nutrition Ambassador of the Government of Tamil Nadu. She's going to be sharing with us her journey and, of course, what it is like to be a youngster in 2025 is a completely unique experience. Would you like to? Yeah?
Greetings, hi to everybody, all the students out there, to the dignitaries. Yes, I am 16. I am Hasini Lakshmi Narayanan. I am a social entrepreneur. I've been working on youth empowerment. And I was also a young delegate at the Alcoy conference, which was held at Mysore last year. And yes, again, I am 16. I'm 11th grader, and I'm so glad that I skipped school to be here today. Because, yeah, the event was all fun and I got to learn so much. And for the same reason, I'd like to thank UNICEF, India, the Department of Environment, Climate Change and Forest, Tamil Nadu, and the organizers of the Climate Change Conference, Tamil Nadu 3.0, for having me here today. It's a great honor. And I'm so glad that I get to represent the future tomorrow, the children, the youth. And per se, I'd like to start with quoting a fact. 1 out of 3 children live in high or extremely high climate risk areas today. And we, the future tomorrow, the children, are not just victims of climate change, but we're also the agents of change itself. I'm pretty sure all of us got to hear so much about the climate crisis, how the government has been taking actions on it, what are we supposed to do, and all of that, and so much more, informative stuff. But then change to me, the way I perceive change, is that change should start from within. We change, the people around us change, we influence change, we create change, and the world changes. Right? And that's how it should be. And I'm so glad that the government and the UNICEF has taken various initiatives to spread awareness about the climate crisis, have created various campaigns to promote, water sanitation and so much, and have done various programs on emergency preparedness and so on. And that really motivates us to also step forward and do something for our planet, because we live in it, right? And it genuinely gives us the responsibility to just give back. And I'll not like to, conclude without, saying something like so strong, or all of the panelists here have done that, more wiser people who've been experienced, who've been working on their own field of expertise. But I'd rather like to conclude by asking a question. What is that we've done as individuals to live a more sustainable life? What is that we have done as individuals to address the climate crisis? What is that we have done as citizens, right? That's also one more thing that we should take back from the conference, I feel, and that's what I am going to take back. And I'd like to conclude by phrasing this statement that I follow. For things to change, I must change first. And I request that we all repeat after me. For things to change, I must change first. Just once more with a lot more energy since I get that this is the last conference. This is the last session for the day. And with that, we wrap up, I hope. So for things to change, I must change first. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Signing off, this is Hasni Lakshminarayanan.
Thank you so much, Hasni. Before we let you go, if I may please request onto the stage, Thiru Vivek Kumar IFS Avargal, Assistant Mission Director, Tamil Nadu Climate Change Mission, to extend a token of our appreciation. Of course, absolutely inspirational, not just for the youngsters around you, but even for the people who are older than you. I think that's saying a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, a loud round of applause for Ms. Hasni. And of course, I think the note that you ended on, which is that we individually must change. I think we're looking at a bunch of agents of change here at the Tamil Nadu Climate Summit 3.0. Thank you so much for joining us here, Hasni. Thank you, sir. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we draw to a close officially Tamil Nadu Climate Summit 3.0. It's been 2 whole days of interesting conversations, one of the most impactful platforms for us to not just discuss these solutions, but also innovate along the way. We've seen how our panelists brought to the fore a lot of the pressing issues. We did have a lot of sessions that ended with a question. We did have many more sessions that ended with solutions. And of course, this is one of those unique panels where we're on a journey, the journey of collaboration, the journey of innovation. So once again, let me just extend on behalf of the entire team, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your presence. But more importantly, thank you so much for caring about the environment so that we have youngsters feeling a lot more empowered. Ladies and gentlemen, we draw to a close Tamil Nadu Climate Summit 3.0. We look forward to seeing you at the next edition with as much passion and gusto. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.